The phone number, if you would like to be a part of this here program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Joe Biden has announced that Kamala Harris will be in charge of the administration's efforts to pass H.R. 1 and the Voting Rights Act. Now, Kamala Harris was previously charged by this White House with dealing with the border situation. As it went to hell in a handbasket, her PR team has had to go to CNN's performative leg humpers and get them to essentially say, well, actually, she was in charge of the situation in Guatemala and El Salvador and Honduras. Not really the border. That wasn't really her thing. The media mischaracterized it. As opposed to Joe Biden, the president of the United States, who said she was going to be in charge of that area. No. Lies. She was not in charge of that, she will have you know. Oh, my goodness gracious. The spin from these people gets insufferable. But there you have it. Now she'll be in charge of this, except you know and I know that when it doesn't get passed, she's going to go back to the performative leg humpers of CNN and have them write a new thing. Well, she wasn't really in charge of that aspect of it. She was actually just in charge of making sure the post office collected people's absentee ballots from their mailboxes, and it's a roaring success. That's what the post office does. They will revise it to give her maximum credit for everything. Meanwhile, Joe Biden is out there with the greatest threat to the United States of America. Do you know what the greatest threat to the United States of America is?
Hate's never defeated. It only hides. It hides. And given a little bit of oxygen, just a little bit of oxygen by its leaders, it comes out of there from under the rock like it was happening again, as if it never went away. And so, folks, we must not give hate a safe harbor. As I said in my address at the joint session of Congress, according to the intelligence community, terrorism from white supremacy is the most lethal threat to the homeland today. Not ISIS, not Al-Qaeda, white supremacists. That's not me. That's the intelligence community under both Trump and under my administration.
Can we believe that, though? Because it's pretty clear that the intelligence community got a little woke. Do we really believe white supremacy is the greatest threat to this country? Not our resurgent Al-Qaeda, not China, not Russia. When was the last time white supremacists tried to influence the election internationally, hack into people's emails, get the Clinton servers, influence and disrupt? I got to tell you, the fascination of this administration with blaming everything on white supremacy, it's part of where progressives are these days. Everything is about white supremacy, but it's not going to be white supremacists who fly airplanes into tall buildings in the future. They've never done that before, but I can tell you who has. We're just not allowed to talk about that because if you do it, it's Islamophobia.
15.
The identity politics and the left is just going to do a lot of damage to this country. This hour of the program sponsored by First Liberty Building and Loan. Wherever you are in the nation, if you're in charge of a business's finances and you want to grow and need access to loans, you can call or go to First Liberty, their website, firstlibertyga.com. They want to help your business become a big business, and they want to help you get to yes, where a lot of banks are telling people no right now. Spend 10 minutes with them, see if you're a good fit. We're talking six figures and higher, though. Six figures and higher. FirstLibertyGA.com is the website. Thanks to them for their sponsorship. I want to expand this out, this white supremacy. We're going to get into Dr. Fauci here in a minute. But I wanted to start with this because no one else really is going to, and I really think it's important for us to focus on the conspiracy theory. And one of the things that I am noticing is there are a lot of conspiracy theories out there, like the Russians stole the election, that if the media elite agree with the conspiracy theory, you're supposed to. And it's the QAnon stuff you're supposed to ridicule. Like, for example, and we'll get to this, it has been common sense, I've been talking about on the radio since last year, that it looks like the lab leak from Wuhan was legit. And yet the media didn't agree with that conspiracy theory and disputed it, and yet it turns out it's real. And the media doing this helps bolster other conspiracy theories, because when the denials come vigorously, people say, well, how can you believe them? We're seeing this with race in this country because the media has invested in the idea that the United States is systemically racist. Systemic racism is a conspiracy theory that is not falsifiable. If you deny it, you're just part of the racism. It is designed to only agree with it. And there's plenty of racism out there that is legitimate, but not everything is racist. And there are plenty of areas out there where you got the people who are the race hustlers who are as bad or worse than others. Consider Google. Good progressives at Google. Kamala Bob is the head of diversity at Google. In a blog post from 2007, he said, this is a direct quote, that Jews have a, quote, insatiable appetite for war and an insensitivity to the suffering of others. The comments were part of a longer meditation from Kamala Bob, the head of diversity strategy at Google, that also slammed Israel's military actions in Gaza and Lebanon that same year. Bob was at the time a research associate in technology at Georgia Tech, according to his LinkedIn page. The post, titled, "If I Were a Jew," described how he believed Jewish people should view the Middle East conflict. "If I were a Jew, I would be concerned about my insatiable appetite for war and killing in defense of myself," he wrote in a personal blog where he was still actively publishing as recently as April of 2021. "Self-defense is undoubtedly an instinct, but I would be afraid of my increasing insensitivity to the suffering of others." The blog featured commentary from Bob on a wide range of issues, including racial equality, U.S. politics, and education policy. He identifies himself as a Google employee in his blog's biography section. Neither Google nor Bob immediately responded to a request for comment from the Washington Free Beacon. Now, he went on to say, "If I were a Jew today, my sensibilities would be tormented. I would find it increasingly difficult to reconcile the long cycles of oppression the Jewish people have endured and the insatiable appetite for vengeful violence that Israel, my homeland, has now acquired." Alrighty then, and this guy is the head of diversity for Google. Head of diversity for Google. We are at a time in this country, as a reaction to Donald Trump's presidency, that many on the left demand that we talk about diversity and racial issues. And what we're finding is that some of the loudest voices and some of the most prominent voices are also not exactly the smartest people out there regarding these issues. I want to play for you real quick some audio here from Ibram Kendi. If you don't know who Ibram Kendi is, consider yourself a blessed person. Ibram Kendi these days is the guy everyone on the left turns to to make themselves feel good about being anti-racist. All the white people on the left love this guy. I had a teacher one time. Carla Boykin was my 11th and 12th grade English teacher, and she was a tough teacher. She actually was a tough teacher in high school and required a lot of precision in your thought and writing. Really actually helped me in law school because I had a law school professor, Reynold Kosick, God rest his soul. You were not allowed to use pronouns. You were not allowed to say, I think or I guess. If you did, he would yell at you. You're being paid not to think or guess, but to know the answer, among other things. Carla Boykin would ask you to define things. And one of her rules was that, very basic, never use a word to define that word. So if I ask you the definition of a hamburger, you do not respond with, well, a hamburger is a hamburger. No, a hamburger is a meat disc called a patty between two buns on which condiments and other things can be applied. You don't define hamburger with hamburger. So keep in mind, Ibram Kendi, he's the guy. The left wants you to follow this guy. He's a secular communist, atheist, who believes that the way to fix racism in this country is to engage in racism. The way to fix systemic discrimination in this country is to engage in systemic discrimination, to make white people pay for what they have done, to realize how bad it was so they'll never do it again because they are the oppressor class and it's in their nature to do this. Ibram Kendi, listen to this exchange. He's at an event.
You talked about the importance of defining racism, but I unless I missed it, which is possible, I didn't hear your personal definition. Is there one that you would offer us? Like, how do you define racism?
Sure. So racism, I would define it as a collection of racist policies that lead to racial inequity that are substantiated by racist ideas. Sure. A collection of racist policies that lead to racial inequity that are substantiated by racist ideas. And anti-racism is pretty simple, using the same terms. Anti-racism is a collection of anti-racist policies leading to racial, anybody want to take a guess? Equity that are substantiated by anti-racist ideas.
That's the best he can do. Again, this is not me. This is him.
You talked about the importance of defining racism, but I unless I missed it, which is possible, I didn't hear your personal definition. Is there one that you would offer us? Like, how do you define racism?
Sure. So racism, I would define it as a collection of racist policies that lead to racial inequity that are substantiated by racist ideas. Sure. A collection of racist policies that lead to racial inequity that are substantiated by racist ideas. And anti-racism is pretty simple, using the same terms. Anti-racism is a collection of anti-racist policies leading to racial, anybody want to take a guess? Equity that are substantiated by anti-racist ideas.
It's important to note that in the laughter there, this guy is a white dude who's being attacked as a European American, is just asking, can you clarify? Yeah, racism is racism. Is it like porn? You know it when you see it? Because he sees it everywhere. You can't, this is the foremost expert on racism in America today, and he can't define what it is. It's just something he decides is bad, and contrast it with something that is good. This is where the Democrats are leading. Now, there's a problem here for the Democrats. Can you figure out what the problem is? You know what the class of people in this country who don't view themselves as a race? White people. white Americans do not view themselves as a race. The response from the American left right now, from the wokes, Boko Haram, the terrorist group that runs rampant in the United States, Boko Haram will cancel any white person who dares to say their whiteness is not a race. The problem here is that the wokes tell you that if you don't view yourself as a race, well, you're privileged. It is your privilege to not have to view yourself as a race. And in fact, your race allows you a color blindness, and you must explicitly view everything in racial terms. So if the left is able to get white people to view themselves as an identity group, which has never happened, so that identity group now votes with the interests of its identity, do you really think the white racial identity group is going to vote for the policies that then demand they give up their power and punish them and engage in anti-racism, which according to Ibram Kendi is reverse discrimination to make white people realize what they've done? Is that going to work out for the left if they actually go down this road and suddenly white people, you're a white person and you must vote as a white person? You cannot think individually for yourself. Oh God, no, you can't do that. You must vote for your class. This is where woke intersectionalism leads, where everyone is part of a class. If that individual operates outside their class, they are an Uncle Tom. If you're Tim Scott, or they're a race traitor, or what have you. You know, if you're a black police officer, policing is a product of white supremacy culture, and therefore you are embedded. Remember that woman in California? She got pulled over. She was a teacher, and she started yelling at the Hispanic police officer that you'll never be white. You'll never be white. I played that audio. I don't think I still have it. But this is where intersectionalism collides with reality. You get a bunch of white people who are willing to vote Democrat. To tell them, you're a white person, you have to vote just like all white people do. Well, most white people vote Republican. You get white people to internalize race in a way they've never internalized race before, and they start voting as a racial group. Well, guess what? They outnumber all the other racial groups. And by the way, a lot of Hispanic voters, the longer they stay here, view themselves as what? White. This blows up in the Democrats' face. It's not sustainable. And by the way, it also forces you to deny progress. If we're to go down this road, we're to deny progress. The Tulsa massacre was bad. This is Andrea Mitchell and some guy on MSNBC.
Talk about this history and how Americans can be so ignorant, really. White Americans, maybe some black Americans, ignorant of what happened 100 years ago.
Well, Andrew, there's a kind of willful ignorance, and the willful ignorance is aimed at kind of protecting our innocence. You see, we don't want to tell ourselves the truth. I mean, connect this to the arguments around the 1619 Project, the arguments against critical race theory, governors trying to punish school districts who will teach anything that's divisive with regards to our history. And so the idea is that we don't want to confront what we've done because we're comfortable with who we are.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Sure. We didn't want to confront it. We didn't want to. Right. As opposed to, we have a pattern of teaching history in this country, and it didn't fit the pattern. But now you white people need to know what you did, and you need to start behaving as a class. That's not going to end well. The racial push on the left in this regard won't work the way they think it's going to work, because you try to get a bunch of people to feel guilty for things they themselves did not do. They react out in ways against you. And when you tell them, as Ibram Kendi does, that your definition of racism is racial policies, well, what are the racial policies? And it just happens to be things like, I don't know, capitalism, making money, it's not going to go well. I want to tell you guys about Eden Pure air purifiers. Eden Pure air purifiers, they're filterless air purifiers that eliminate odor, take care of black mold in your house and mildew. It gets rid of the smells. We use them in our house. My son has just awful allergies. We got to get allergy shots in our house. And we run one of these at night in his room, and it's great. We take them when we go camping, when we go out somewhere. We stayed at a house up in the mountains that had a fireplace. It helps eliminate